Hi, hello, how are you? Craig Chapman here, and welcome to Brutally Roll Your Own Backend, a short video series on writing your own low-cost backend for a Delphi application. This is part 2. We're going to take a look at setting up a server to host the backend. If you have an existing server set up with a LAMP stack, then you may want to skip this part and move on to part 3. But today we're going to look at opening an account with Linode, setting up a new server with Linode, and installing all of the software that we need to get that server up and running with a LAMP stack. So without any more delay, let's get on with it. Okay, so the first thing we need is a server to host our backend on. And I like to get my servers hosted as virtual servers over at Linode. So head on over to linode.com if you want to use the same service, or you can use any other that suits you. Now, one of the reasons I like using Linode is they run on solid state disks, which makes them very quick to set up, very quick to bring down, and they're very reasonably priced, the cheapest server being offered at just $10 a month. But even more than that, if you decide, for example, you don't need the server for the whole month, you can close the server at any time and be refunded the difference on the month. It's pro rata. So go ahead and click on sign up and get yourself an account with Linode. You'll likely be asked to put in some payment information and things like that, but eventually when you go through that process, you'll be brought to the dashboard. This is this page for me. I already have an account. Now I've got 3 running servers here, and what you're going to want to do is click on add a Linode. You'll have no servers listed. I already have 3 set up. So go ahead and click on add a Linode, and then you want to choose the plan. In this case, the 2048, $10 a month is sufficient. And then from the location, you can choose where in the world your server is going to be hosted. Now, I've already set up a server for this video, so I'm going to come back to my panel, but if you follow that wizard through, you'll end up with one of these listings. Now, this server at the bottom here on 45.33.25.111, this is the server that I've already set up for this video. What we need to do is click on the link for that server, and then again, this is where I'm going to use a slightly different option to you. You won't have the rebuild option, which I do. You'll be going through deploy an image, and in this wizard you're going to choose Ubuntu 14.04, and the reason for that is I actually have some scripts already set up that I know are tested for 14.04 that we're going to use, and then in this option here you're going to choose 512. So for the swap disk, make it the biggest swap disk, and then you want to put in a password, and in my case I'm going to use brutally roll your own as a password. So fill this out and be ready to click deploy. I'm going to back up here and go to rebuild, and it's exactly the same settings to rebuild the server. I just have to go through this option instead of deploy, and my password is brutally roll your own. So you'll click on deploy, I click on rebuild, and it's going to bring us back to the dashboard page for our server, and you can see my existing server is being shut down. After that happens, it's going to delete my existing disks. Those 2 steps should be absent from yours, but then you should have creating a disk from the Ubuntu distribution and setting up the swap image. So go ahead and deploy a server in this way, and I'm going to speed this video up until this process is finished. Okay, so now that this process is finished, our server is ready to start up, but it's not running yet. You can see here it's powered off. So I'm going to go ahead and click this boot button here, and that will start our server up. And while we're waiting for that system to boot, we're going to need a way to access this server when it's running. So access is done through a system called SSH. Our server has started, so we're ready. If I go over to remote access, you can see that they suggest logging in using SSH as the root user and then the IP address of the server. Now on Windows, I like to use PuTTY. I think it's probably the best or maybe even only available SSH client for Windows. So I download mine from this mirror, greenend.org.uk. You can download from any mirror you choose, but I like this one. Having said that, earlier when I clicked on the PuTTY executable link, I got a warning from my antivirus software. I'm sure that's a false flag. I've downloaded it here many times before and scanned the app. But I'm going to go ahead and hit this latest development snapshot link because that one doesn't trigger the antivirus. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show all downloads and open the downloads folder. Now this file here, putty, is the executable that we need. There is no installation file. So if I, let's go ahead and scan that with the antivirus just to be sure. No threat found, good. And go ahead and double click and run. Now that's going to bring up, sorry, I have multiple screens here, drag this across. So that's going to bring up putty. Now I already have an entry in here. Let's delete that out so it looks like it would when new. So this is where you're going to put in the details for connecting to your server. But I don't like running putty out of my downloads folder. So what I would do is I would take a copy of this, or cut, and I would go to my C drive, program files, and I'm going to paste it in program files. Replace the existing and continue. And there we go. So we have putty in here, and then I would say send to desktop create shortcut. So that will create a shortcut for me on my desktop. I'm going to go ahead and open putty. Here we go. And we'll start setting up a server connection in here. So if we come back to the Linode remote access page, we've got this IP address. This is the IPv4. I'm going to take a copy of that and come over and paste it in here. And then we want to give this server a name. Because we're writing a notification app, I'm going to call this server notifier. Just give it something memorable and hit save. So now we're ready. If we come into putty, we're going to have this menu option, and I can double click and it brings up this security warning. So this is just saying the SSH certificate of this server is new to the Windows machine that I'm operating from. Do I want to accept it? And yes, I do. Which is going to leave us at a login prompt. Now we can see on the Linode page here that they expect us to log in as root. So I'm going to go ahead and hit root. And we gave the root user a password when we initially set up the Linode server. So whatever you put in, if you remember, I put in brutally roll your own. Put that password in, and that gets you logged in as the root user. Logging into your server as the root user is not really recommended. Ideally, we want to lock out the root user account. So the next steps with this machine, usually I would send you into the Linode documentation. I'm not going to do that, but let's go and take a look at it real quick anyway. So the documentation has this quick start guide. And the quick start guide gives you everything you need to sign up an account, start up a server, log into it, and then it goes through telling you how to update the software, secure the server, and even install Apache, MySQL, and PHP, which we need. Unfortunately, all of that's going to take far too long. So what I've done is I've actually built a script set of my own, and it's called BROLLY. Let's go and take a quick look at that. Okay, so on my blog here at chapmanworld.com, brutally-build-your-own-server-server-script-BROLLY. I will make sure this link appears on the blog page for this video series. So BROLLY is a set of scripts that I've been using for a couple of years now to set up my servers. It wasn't called BROLLY until a few days ago when I decided to put a menu system into the scripts. So what you want to do, and there will be a how-to video coming soon, but what you want to do for the moment is simply download the initialization script using this instruction, wget http brolly.chapmanworld.com brollyinit.bash. So I'm going to take a copy of that, and I'm going to paste that into my putty. So that's downloaded the initialization script, and to run it, we type bash brollyinit.bash. So now we're going to begin setting up our server. And one of the things that this script does is it sets the server's name and domain name. If I pop back over to Linode, you're perfectly okay to use this domain name, but I already have a domain name set up for my server. So the first thing I'm going to do is name it. I'm going to call it notifier, and then I'm going to put in the domain name, so chapmanworld.com. The reason I'm using these settings is I've already forwarded notifier.chapmanworld.com at this server, but you could call it anything you like, call it notifier if you like, and use this as your domain name from the Linode page. The next setting that we want is the IPv4 address. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and put that into the script. Make sure when you're copying into this that you don't put any spaces. It will not validate the input. You want to make sure the input at this stage is accurate. So we're going to do the same thing with the IPv6 address. Okay, and we're going to set the time zone for this server. You can look up a list of available time zones for your server online, but I'm going to stick with US Central. And now we come to the admin user. So far what the script is preparing to do is to set the domain name and the time zone and the IP address of the server. But now it's also going to lock out our access to the root user, because it's not sensible to have an administrative user that you can log into remotely. What we're going to do instead is create a non-administrative user, which in this case I'm just calling admin user. And from that non-administrative user, we will be able to elevate our privileges and become the root user again. So I would recommend that you change the username here from admin user to something, maybe your own name or something else, but just don't use the defaults. For a password, what I would absolutely recommend against is using the same password as your root account, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to do just that. So brutally roll your own, and perhaps I should have picked a shorter password. So we're going to get a summary of the things that the server is going to set up for us. I'm going to go ahead and hit yes, and it's now working. The first thing it's doing is it's updating all of the software packages for Ubuntu. Then it's going to go ahead and lock us out of the root user account. It's going to set the domain and the time zone, and it'll install the BROLLY scripts for us. At that point, the server is going to reboot itself. So let's go ahead and give this server a moment to finish. And there we can see the server has started rebooting itself. It's logged us out of the putty session. And if we come and back over to our dashboard on Linode, we can see at the moment this just says system boot. Let's refresh the page a few times. What we're waiting for is an entry that says Lassie initiated boot. Okay, after refreshing the page a few times, I've got Lassie initiated boot on my screen, and I don't know if you caught it there, but it was animating as it worked. After the animation is finished, we're looking for it to say success, Lassie initiated boot. That means that our server has shut itself down and started itself back up again. So once more into putty. This time, if you were to try and log in as root, you would be locked out. Let's just demonstrate that that's true. So root and brutally roll your own, and you'll find that access is denied. So what I'm going to do instead is we're going to log in using the user account that we gave to the BROLLY script, which was admin user in this case, and the same password, brutally roll your own. So we're now logged into the server. It doesn't have any software on it yet, and we're logged in as a non-administrative user. This just means that people can't log in as a non-administrative user, and if they do log in as this user, they don't know the password to elevate themselves to root. We do know that password because it was the password that we put in to the Linode manager when we deployed. So I'm going to type SU for the super user account, and then I'm going to put in that password. Brutally roll your own. So I'm now the administrative user, and the BROLLY init script has installed the command BROLLY for us. Now this command is quickly going to go ahead and update a bunch of scripts, and then it's going to bring us to a menu. Okay, so now the script's gone ahead and updated itself. It's asking us, are you restoring an existing system from a backup? And the answer in this case, of course, is no, because this is the first time that we've set this script up. And here's the menu that we're waiting for. So this menu is what I recently added to my scripts, and it's going to enable us to install the software that we need. So I'm going to start by going to option 2, which is to install new software. Now this first menu will always have the same options. There are a couple missing that you'll see in a moment, but it's always going to have the same numbers for its entries. This second menu, however, the install software menu, is going to have different numbers every time. And that's because once we've installed the firewall, that option will disappear and the lamp stack will become number 1. So I'm going to go ahead and hit number 1 to install the firewall. And I'm going to let the script do its thing. And now that the script is finished, when we come back to the main menu, let's see, I'm back at the main menu. So I'm going to go ahead and hit option number 4 for configure software. And I've actually got there option number 1 is to configure the firewall. So I can go in and let's say we choose option number 1 to list the currently open ports. You'll see that at the moment the firewall has port number 22 open for the TCP protocol, and that's the port that we're using to connect through PuSSY. If we wanted to, we could use option 2 to open a port. So let's go ahead and open a random port. Let's say we're going to open the TCP port 53280, and back at the menu, if we hit number 1, we can see now that 53280 is open. And let's go ahead and close that port back off, 53280, and that's closed that port back off for us. Now installing the firewall has also given us an additional command at the command prompt. So I'm going to choose option 0 to come out of this menu, 0 again to exit the BROLLY script, and we'll take a look at BROLLY FW, which is the shortcut for BROLLY firewall, and I'm just going to add the list instruction. So that's listing the ports that are open, and if we wanted to open a port, it would be open. Then you would choose either TCP, UDP, or both. Let's open both, and the port number that you want to open. So let's open 53280 again, just to demonstrate. Hit list, there you can see it's open, and then to close a port, we'll do BROLLY FW close 53280. So you now have an admin script which you can use to manage your firewall. But if we go back into BROLLY, of course you can do that all from the BROLLY menu. We're going to install a new piece of software, so that's option number 2. And this time we're going to install the backup and restore script. Now this is optional for the video series. I have an SFTP server set up already. If you don't have an FTP or SFTP server set up, then don't install the backup software. This is here as an option so that when you get to the point that you are actually actively using your server, you'll have a backup of your config. So I'm going to demonstrate how that all works, but if you don't have an available FTP right now, don't worry about it, you can fix that, you can add that later. So I'm going to go ahead and hit option 2, and now I'm being asked, am I using SFTP or FTP? Well, as it happens, my FTP site is an SFTP, so that's the option I'm going to use. And I'm now being asked for the host, so I'm just going to copy and paste that in here. I'm being asked for a directory, so you could, on your FTP server, you could set up a directory specifically for this server's backups. I'm just going to put this into the root because I actually set the account up specifically for this video. So I'm going to leave that blank, and then I need a username, which I'll copy and paste in here. And the password that I set up again for this video was brutally roll your own. Okay, so now being asked yes, no to proceed to set the backup software up. I hit yes, and it's installed. And this has added another 2 instructions that you can call from the command line. BROLLY backup will create a backup, and BROLLY restore will restore from a previous backup. And in both of these cases, you need to be the super user. So you'll need to issue the su command and enter your root password. But we're not going to do that just yet. Before we create a backup, I'm going to install another piece of software. Now this option, LAMP stack or AMP stack, stands for Apache, MySQL, and PHP. So by hitting option 1, this is going to install all 3 of those pieces of software. Apache is the web server that we're going to use. MySQL is the database that we're going to use, and PHP we're going to use for scripting our backend. So let's go ahead and hit 1, and it'll ask me, do I want to set this up for a low-end server, a medium server, or a high-end server? Because we're using the Linode 2048, we'll stick with low. And then it's asking me for a password for the root user of the database. Of course, you should choose something unique for this, but again, I'm going to go for brutally roll your own. Now, because we installed the firewall package first, BROLLY is able to punch holes in the firewall for us. So what I'm going to do is, do I want to open port 80? Well, that's the page that HTTP pages are served on, so yes, I want to open that port. 443 is the HTTPS protocol. I'm not going to be using that in this video series, so I'm going to say no. And 3306, it's not recommended, but it is possible for you to remotely connect to your MySQL database. And if you want to do that, you would need to open the port. As I said, not recommended, so I'm going to go ahead and say no. Sorry about the noise there. I think there might have been a very loud engine outside. Okay, so that's now installing Apache. It's installing PHP. Let's see, where are we? It's installing the PHP extensions, including PHP curl. In this case, it's installing PHP 5. Had I gone for the Ubuntu 16 server, then I'd probably want to install PHP 7. I'm going to add that option into the script at some point in the future, but at the moment it's still using PHP 5. Okay, so the installation is complete, and press any key to continue. So what we now have is a working web server. If I go to var www and HTML, for example, so this is the root directory of our server, but we don't have any websites set up in it yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to issue the BROLLY instruction again, and notice that options 5 and 6 have appeared. Because we installed the backup package, we can do a backup and restore from the menu here. But I'm going to go into option number 4 to configure software, and I want to configure the LAMP stack, so I'm going to go into option 2. And what are the options here? Back to previous menu, create a new site, delete a site, or restart the server. Well, I want to create a new site. As I said, I've already pointed notifier.chapmanworld.com. Now, again, if you wanted to set this up for testing purposes, you could use the domain that you entered from here, but I'm going to go right ahead and use the domain that or the subdomain that I've pointed at this server. So I go ahead and hit enter, and it has created a site for me. It's now restarting the Apache server, and we're done. So I'm going to hit 0 to exit this menu, 0 to exit the BROLLY script, and if I step into www again, we'll see that now I have a new directory, notifier.chapmanworld.com. So I'm going to step into that directory by issuing cd notifier. That's change directory notifier.chapmanworld.com, and issue ls to list the directory, and we can see that it's created a log directory. That's where it's going to put the logs of the Apache server. It's created a private directory, which we'll come to that later, and it's created a public directory. Now if I change into the public directory, there's nothing in here. So if I were to navigate now to that address, notifier.chapmanworld.com, you'll see that we're basically just getting a listing of the directory at chapmanworld.com. You can actually disable the listing ability, but we don't need to. We're going to go ahead and put something in here. So I'm going to type nano. Nano is just a text editor for the Linux prompt, and I'm going to edit a file called index.php. And I'm just going to put in a few simple instructions here. So we're going to put in ~PHP, which is the header for a PHP file. We're going to issue the php info instruction, and then we're going to go close out of the PHP script. I'm going to press Control X to exit this nano editor, and yes to save the changes, and the file name we're going to keep as index.php, so I hit enter. So now we have this file, if we refresh the page, we get this PHP proof that we have a running LAMP stack. Okay, so that's pretty much it for configuring the server, and you're welcome to leave the video at this point, but I want to show you one last thing that we can do with the BROLLY script. So I'm going to go ahead and hit BROLLY at the command line, and I'm going to perform a backup. And what this is doing, it's just created a backup and uploaded it to the FTP site that I configured earlier. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to go through, and I'm not going to make you follow me, but I'm going to go through the stages of reinitializing, redeploying this server again. I'm going to log in and install BROLLY again, and then I'll come back to you when I've got to that point. Okay, so I basically just went over and started this entire video's instructions again. So I rebuilt my server, I came across to build your own, and I've issued this wget command and initiated the BROLLY init script. And that's brought me back to this point where I have a server which has nothing running on it. So if I go ahead and take a look at this domain again, do a refresh, we'll see that the page should be broken. And that's because the server has no software. It has no Apache, no MySQL, no PHP. So it looks as though we're going to have to start all over again installing software, but we don't. What we need to do is issue the su command to become the super user, and again it's brutally roll your own. Okay, and then when I issue the BROLLY script this time, again it's the first time, so it's going to update the script from the website, and then it's going to ask, are you restoring from an existing system backup? Well, this time the answer of course is yes. Last time we said no because it was a new server, but because I've already initialized and backed up the server, this time I'm going to say yes. And now it's going to install the backup software automatically. So it's asking me, where are your backups? Well, SFTP, and let's go and get my host and copy that in again. And in the root directory, and the username is this one. Lots of copying and pasting. And the password was brutally roll your own. And when I hit yes this time, what's going to happen is the first thing that's happening, of course, is the backup and restore package is installed. So I'll confirm that and confirm again. And now it's going to tell me these are the backups that I have on file for you. And it's automatically picked the latest one. So the one that we did at 3. The earlier 2 were from previous tests that I ran on these scripts. So we're going to go ahead and restore this one. And what's happening now is we've downloaded the backup file, and the script is going through installing all of the software that we had installed before. So the Apache server is being reinstalled, MySQL is being reinstalled, PHP, and so on. And once it's reinstalled all of that software, it's also going to restore the content and the config that we had for that software. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a moment to finish. Okay, and now the script is finished. If I refresh this page, we have our page back up and running. So the reason I wanted to show you this is in the case that you have a server running and it is backed up and something goes wrong with its config, the server fails, whatever, then you can easily get back to a running server by simply reinitializing and running the BROLLY script over and then restoring one of its backup files. So that's the reason that I wanted to demonstrate that functionality. So that's it. We have a running LAMP server. So I think that'll finish us for this part, and in part 3 we'll actually begin connecting to our LAMP server and start building the backend scripts in PHP. So until next time, I've been Craig Chapman, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.